Which European country squeezes its citizens the hardest? Forget just income tax. That's just one layer. The real number is what's left after every part of the system is done with your money. Your paycheck, your grocery run, your entire economic life. We built the Real Tax Burden Index across 31 European nations. Using official OECD and Eurostat data, we measured 3 things that hit the average worker directly: the tax on your labour, the VAT on everything you spend, and the structural weight of the state through the tax-to-GDP ratio. Full methodology in the description. From genuine low-tax havens to the countries quietly crushing the middle class. This is Europe's true tax burden, ranked. Welcome to Amazing Europe. Number 31. Switzerland. Switzerland ranks last on our index. The lightest official tax environment for an average worker in Europe. But don't pack your bags just yet. The Swiss system is radically decentralized. Taxes shift dramatically depending on which canton or even which village you call home. Federal income tax barely touches your salary, and VAT sits at a razor-thin 8.1%. Sounds like paradise. Here's the catch. Switzerland doesn't tax you through the government. It bills you directly. Private health insurance is mandatory by law, and it can run into hundreds of euros every month. Add compulsory out-of-pocket costs across the board, and the low-tax illusion evaporates fast for ordinary workers. This is a system engineered for wealthy individuals and corporate headquarters. High salaries? Yes, but eye-watering living costs to match. Number 30. Cyprus. Cyprus didn't stumble into being a tax haven. It engineered one deliberately. Labour tax sitting under 16%. A regulatory framework built for digital nomads, shipping magnates, and foreign capital. On paper, it looks like paradise. But there's a dark origin story. In 2013, the Cypriot government did something almost unthinkable. It reached directly into citizens' bank accounts and seized their money. A desperate bail-in to survive a total financial collapse. Trust evaporated overnight. To lure capital back, they slashed taxes to the bone. It worked. Foreign money flooded in. Real estate boomed. The losers? Ordinary Cypriots, priced out of their own cities by the very foreigners their tax code attracts. Low taxes came at a cost, just not the kind that shows up on your paycheck. Number 29. Bulgaria. Bulgaria's 10% flat tax is legendary, one of the lowest personal income rates on the planet. Introduced in 2008 to crush rampant post-Soviet tax evasion, it pulled off a paradox. Slash the rate, watch revenues climb. People actually started declaring their income. But our index exposes the other side of that deal. To compensate, Bulgaria leans hard on a 20% VAT, a tax you pay every time you buy something. And that's where the system turns predatory. A family spending every euro on food and basic necessities pays a higher real tax rate than a millionaire in Sofia. Not metaphorically, mathematically. This is a structure that punishes survival and rewards wealth accumulation with a result you can measure. Bulgaria carries one of the highest income inequality rates in the entire European Union. Number 28. Czech Republic. On paper, the Czech Republic looks like a worker's dream. The tax wedge is remarkably low, but the reason is stranger than you'd expect. For years, Czechia taxed employees on money they never actually received, using a deeply controversial system called the super gross wage. In 2021, the government scrapped it, and overnight, millions of workers got a massive tax cut without a single campaign promise. But economics doesn't do free lunches. Slashing labour taxes without touching public spending blew a serious hole in the national budget. So the government found another way to quietly claw it back, steadily hiking excise duties on alcohol, tobacco and energy. Nickel and diming citizens at the checkout line to fund the political popularity earned by cutting their income tax. The burden didn't disappear. It just got harder to see. Number 27. Estonia. Estonia is the Baltic Sea's answer to Silicon Valley. A digital-first society where filing your taxes takes exactly 3 minutes, and a 24% flat rate keeps the system clean and simple. Globally admired, easy to love. But here's the trick. Estonia didn't lower the tax burden, it just made it invisible. The cost of social security was shifted almost entirely onto employers. Gone from your paycheck, hidden in your boss's spreadsheet. In Tallinn, workers feel well paid and lightly taxed, completely unaware that their employer is quietly hemorrhaging a 33% social tax just to keep them on the payroll. The result is a masterclass in fiscal psychology. Citizens praise the government for taxing them so little, never realizing that the same invisible wall is the reason their salaries aren't significantly higher. Number 26. Malta. Malta is the smallest EU member state, but its tax architecture punches far above its weight. Labour tax under 25% and a VAT rate of just 18%, the second lowest standard rate in the entire European Union, by design. Since the 1990s, Malta has built its economy on a deliberate strategy: attract foreign financial services, iGaming companies, and crypto businesses with low corporate rates, a warm climate, and English as an official language. The tax system for ordinary workers became a side effect of that strategy, almost accidentally generous. But here's the tension. That same flood of foreign capital has driven up property prices to levels completely disconnected from local salaries. Maltese workers enjoy a light tax burden and then spend every euro saved fighting one of the most overheated housing markets in Mediterranean Europe. Number 25. Spain. Spain's position here will surprise many. A country synonymous with economic crisis, record youth unemployment, and political dysfunction. And yet, for an average worker, the real tax burden sits comfortably in the lower half of Europe. Why? Because Spain operates a deeply unequal tax system that rewards geography. Live in Madrid or the Basque Country, and your regional income tax rate can be dramatically lower than if you live in Catalonia or Extremadura. The fiscal war between Spanish regions has created a patchwork system where two workers earning the same salary, living 2 hours apart, pay meaningfully different taxes. There's also an elephant in the room: Spain's shadow economy. Estimated at over 15% of GDP, undeclared work is structurally embedded. When millions avoid paying taxes entirely, the official tax-to-GDP ratio looks artificially moderate, making the burden on those who do pay appear lighter than it truly is. Number 24. Slovakia. Slovakia was once held up as Eastern Europe's success story. In 2004, it introduced a radical 19% flat tax on income, VAT, and corporate profits simultaneously, the same rate for everything. Economists called it the Slovak miracle. Foreign investment poured in, Volkswagen and Kia built factories. GDP surged, then the miracle got complicated. The flat tax was gradually dismantled by successive governments. The income tax now sits at progressive rates. VAT climbed to 23%. The original architects of the Slovak miracle watched their creation get reversed, election by election, under pressure from a public that never fully trusted the system to be fair. Today, Slovakia sits in the lower middle of our index, not because taxes are genuinely low, but because a car manufacturing dependent economy keeps wages moderate, which mathematically compresses the tax wedge. The miracle is still running, quietly, on Volkswagen's payroll. Number 23. Poland. Poland is one of the EU's most remarkable economic stories. For 3 consecutive decades, it never entered recession, the only major economy in Europe to survive the 2008 financial crisis without shrinking, and its tax system played a quiet but crucial role in that story. In 2022, Poland launched the Polish Deal, a sweeping tax reform that raised the income tax-free threshold from 8,000 to 30,000 zloty. Overnight, millions of low-income workers stopped paying income tax entirely. Political triumph, except it wasn't. The reform was so chaotically drafted that it accidentally raised taxes on doctors, teachers, and civil servants. The government had to issue emergency corrections mid-year, in real time. It became one of the most spectacular fiscal self-goals in modern European history. Poland's relatively low position in our ranking reflects genuine structural moderation, but also a tax system still sorting itself out after its own ambitions got ahead of its execution. Number 22. Ireland. Ireland's number on our index looks moderate, but it hides one of the most spectacular fiscal paradoxes in modern Europe. On paper, Ireland has a tax-to-GDP ratio of just 22.4%, the lowest in our entire ranking. It looks like a tax haven. It isn't. The number is an illusion caused by one of the most distorted GDP figures in the world. When Apple, Google, and Meta book their European profits through Dublin, they inflate Irish GDP astronomically, making the tax ratio look tiny against an artificially giant denominator. Irish workers themselves pay a perfectly normal tax wedge. It's their GDP that's broken, not their tax system. The Irish call it leprechaun economics. Even their own statisticians can't take the headline number seriously. Number 21. Portugal. Portugal spent a decade drowning in austerity. After its 2011 bailout, the government slashed spending, hiked taxes, and watched its best and brightest emigrate by the hundreds of thousands. Engineers, doctors, nurses, gone. To reverse the brain drain, Portugal invented something radical in 2009, the non-habitual resident regime, a flat 20% income tax for foreign professionals and returning emigrants for 10 consecutive years. It worked spectacularly for attracting wealthy expats and tech workers. It also created a two-tier country where a Portuguese nurse pays full progressive taxes while her foreign neighbour in the same apartment building pays half. The regime was finally reformed in 2024 under enormous public pressure. Portugal's moderate index score reflects structural restraint, earned through painful fiscal consolidation that its citizens are still recovering from. Number 20. Sweden. Sweden at number 20 will shock many viewers. The country most associated with crushing Scandinavian taxes sits firmly in the lower half of our ranking. Here's why. Sweden is the global pioneer of a counterintuitive idea: tax competition within the welfare state. Since the 1990s crisis, when Sweden's banking system nearly collapsed entirely, successive governments quietly but systematically reduced the tax wedge on labour. They wanted to make work pay more than welfare. It worked. Employment rates soared. Sweden today taxes consumption and capital heavily, but labour? Deliberately moderate. The result is a paradox visible in the numbers. A country with one of the world's most generous welfare systems, funded not by crushing workers' salaries, but by taxing what they buy and quietly shifting the rest onto employers. Number 19. Latvia. Latvia is one of Europe's most extreme economic laboratories. After the 2008 financial crisis, it suffered one of the worst recessions in the world. GDP collapsed by nearly 25% in 2 years. Rather than devalue its currency, Latvia chose brutal internal devaluation, slashing public salaries, cutting pensions, eliminating entire government ministries. The world called it impossible. Latvia proved them wrong and recovered faster than anyone predicted. That experience hardwired fiscal conservatism into the national DNA. Latvia now operates one of the more restrained tax systems in the EU, but the human cost was enormous. Emigration accelerated dramatically, hollowing out entire regions. Latvia's moderate tax burden today is partly the legacy of that trauma. A small state born from a society that paid for its fiscal discipline in population, not just in austerity. Number 18. Netherlands. The Netherlands at 18 looks reasonable. The reality is more complex and more revealing. The Dutch have mastered the art of the fiscal illusion. For decades, the Netherlands operated the most sophisticated corporate tax routing system in Europe. Royalty payments, interest flows, and dividends from multinationals across the globe pass through Dutch shell structures, generating enormous tax revenues, while keeping the apparent burden on workers moderate. But in 2021, under intense EU and OECD pressure, the Netherlands began dismantling its most aggressive tax routing mechanisms. The era of Dutch tax arbitrage is closing. What remains is a middle-income country with a compressed labour tax wedge, a standard 21% VAT, and a real estate market so overheated that workers spend what they save on taxes fighting for the right to afford a mortgage. Number 17. Greece. Greece's position in the lower half of this ranking will confuse anyone who lived through the crisis years, but the number tells a specific and revealing story. Greece has one of Europe's most deeply embedded tax evasion cultures, described by Greek politicians themselves as a national sport. Up to 30 billion euros in taxes went uncollected annually at the peak of the crisis. The shadow economy still hovers around 21% of GDP today. The consequence? When millions don't pay, the official tax-to-GDP ratio looks artificially moderate. But the employees who can't evade, salaried workers, carry a disproportionate share of everything. 79% of all declared income in Greece comes from employed workers. Greece doesn't have a low tax burden. It has an unequally distributed one. Number 16. Iceland. Iceland at 16 carries a hidden story of national transformation. In 2008, Iceland suffered the largest banking collapse relative to GDP in recorded history. All three major banks failed simultaneously. The economy imploded. The government faced a choice: bail out the banks or let them fall and protect ordinary citizens instead. Iceland chose to let the banks fail. Bankers were prosecuted. Creditors took the losses. The recovery required painful measures. VAT was hiked to 25.5%. Income taxes rose. Emergency levies appeared. But the burden was deliberately designed to be temporary and progressive. A decade later, Iceland had fully recovered, with one of the lowest unemployment rates in Europe. The moderate index score today reflects a country that used fiscal pressure as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, and came out the other side intact. Number 15. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom sits almost exactly at the midpoint of our ranking. For the world's sixth largest economy, that result deserves a closer look. Britain's tax system is a product of decades of layering. Income taxes, national insurance contributions, council taxes, stamp duties. Each government added complexity without ever rationalising what came before. The result is one of the most opaque fiscal architectures in the developed world. What the aggregate number hides is a deep inequality in distribution. Low earners can face marginal effective tax rates exceeding 60% once benefit withdrawal is factored in, a poverty trap quietly built into the welfare state itself. Meanwhile, high earners and wealth holders navigate a system riddled with legitimate relief mechanisms, from ISAs to pension contribution limits, that ordinary salaried workers simply cannot access. A middle ranking on paper, a deeply unequal system underneath. Number 14. France. France at 14 is this ranking's most counterintuitive result. The country synonymous with high taxes, generous welfare, and explosive protests against fiscal reform, sitting comfortably in the middle of the pack. The explanation is structural. France has historically shifted a massive portion of its labour costs onto employers rather than employees. The worker's paycheck looks lighter than reality because the real weight is absorbed invisibly by the company paying the salary. The result is that French workers genuinely feel less taxed than their German or Belgian counterparts, even as their employers face one of the highest non-wage labour cost burdens in Europe. This creates a specific political dynamic. French workers protest fiercely when governments try to touch their benefits, because they genuinely don't see the full cost of those benefits. The bill is hidden in their bosses' accounts. Number 13. Norway. Norway sits at 13, not low, but nowhere near the Scandinavian extreme many would expect. Here's the uncomfortable question. Norway manages a sovereign wealth fund worth over $2 trillion, the largest in the world, built entirely from oil revenues. Enough, theoretically, to eliminate income tax for every Norwegian citizen for decades. It hasn't. Over the past 15 years, Norwegian politicians have channeled almost all of that fund's returns into expanding public spending, not into cutting taxes. Researchers have openly questioned why. The answer appears political. Spending is visible and popular. Tax cuts are harder to take credit for. The result is a paradox. Norway's citizens pay a perfectly substantial tax burden, while sitting on top of the greatest financial cushion any government on earth has ever accumulated. The wealth is there. The relief isn't. Number 12. Luxembourg. Luxembourg is the richest country per capita in the European Union, and yet, for an average worker, the tax burden sits at a surprisingly moderate 29.95. The reason is structural and slightly uncomfortable. Luxembourg's economy is built almost entirely on financial services, investment funds, and multinational headquarters. Amazon, PayPal, and dozens of major corporations chose Luxembourg as their European base specifically for its favourable tax treatment. The tax revenues generated by that corporate machinery are so vast, They subsidize relatively competitive conditions for ordinary workers. But this creates a fundamental dependency. Luxembourg's entire social contract, generous public services, well-maintained infrastructure, competitive salaries, rests on a financial industry that could, theoretically, relocate under sufficient regulatory pressure. Workers here are comfortable, but their comfort has a single point of failure. Number 11. Italy. Italy at number 11 carries a number that needs immediate context. A tax wedge of 30.38% sounds almost reasonable for a Western European economy. It isn't, because Italy's official numbers systematically understate the real burden. An estimated 10.2% of Italian GDP goes undeclared. Self-employed workers and professionals evade at rates exceeding 50% in some income brackets. The consequence is devastating for everyone who can't evade: salaried employees. They carry a disproportionate share of the entire fiscal system on their paycheck. Italy doesn't have a moderate tax burden. It has a moderate average, hiding an extreme inequality between those the system can see and those it cannot. Pay your taxes fully in Italy, and you're effectively subsidizing those who don't. Number 10. Croatia. Croatia is one of the EU's youngest members, joining only in 2013, and its tax system tells the story of a country still rewriting its own rules. Since accession, Croatia has gone through 4 distinct rounds of tax reform, each one lowering the income tax burden, raising the personal allowance, and trying to modernize a system inherited partly from socialist Yugoslavia and partly from the chaotic 1990s post-war reconstruction. The result today is a genuine middle ground system, lower labour taxes than most Western European neighbours, standard 25% VAT, and a tax-to-GDP ratio that reflects a state still building its institutional capacity. Croatia joined the Eurozone in 2023. The discipline required for that transition forced additional fiscal consolidation, a country still under construction, but building faster than most of its peers expected. Number 9. Finland. Finland at number 9 is firmly in Europe's high tax club. Yet, for a country that represents the global gold standard of public services, free university, universal healthcare, world-class infrastructure, that steep price tag is one its citizens actually defend. The explanation lies in efficiency, not generosity. Finland has spent decades obsessively measuring the return on every euro of public spending. When the IMF reviewed Finland's system, they found it was genuinely delivering more social welfare per tax euro than almost any comparable economy. Finland also faces the same structural threat as every Nordic country, an aging population shrinking the workforce that funds the system. The government knows the math doesn't work forever. Finland taxes heavily, but unlike many countries in this ranking, its citizens can point at exactly what that money built. Number 8. Austria. Austria sits at number 8. Not the worst in Europe, but the tax-to-GDP ratio tells a different story. 43.8%, one of the highest on the continent. The explanation runs deeper than politics. Austria is the direct institutional heir of the Habsburg Empire, a vast multi-ethnic bureaucracy governing 50 million people across a dozen languages and territories. To hold that structure together, the state needed enormous continuous revenues. That fiscal appetite became cultural. The empire collapsed in 1918. The instinct never did. Today, Austria has one of the most deeply embedded public sectors in Western Europe. State presence in housing, healthcare, infrastructure, culture, and media is simply taken for granted. Austrians accept this. Surveys consistently show higher public trust in state institutions than in most comparable European democracies. The Habsburgs are gone. Their bill remains. Number 7. Romania. Romania surprises almost everyone at number 7. A country historically associated with poverty, corruption, and post-communist dysfunction, sitting above Italy, France, and the Netherlands in real tax burden. The story starts in 2005, when Romania introduced a radical 16% flat tax on personal income and corporate profits simultaneously. Tax revenues jumped 44.7% in a single year. People started declaring income they had hidden for years. But Romania's real fiscal genius came later. To stop devastating brain drain in its tech sector, the government introduced a 0% income tax for software developers. a policy that transformed Bucharest and Cluj into genuine digital hubs, even though recent budget deficits have forced the government to start rolling it back. The paradox? Romania taxes its average worker harder than Spain or Portugal, while actively engineering escape routes for exactly the skilled workers it most needs to keep. Number 6. Hungary. Hungary under Viktor Orbán has become Europe's most controversial economic laboratory, and the tax system is central to that experiment. In 2011, Orbán scrapped the progressive income tax entirely and replaced it with a flat 15% rate for everyone. Simultaneously, he introduced sweeping family tax exemptions. Families with 3 or more children can effectively pay zero income tax, a direct attempt to reverse Hungary's catastrophic demographic collapse. The ideological logic is explicit. Don't tax families, tax consumption and corporations instead. VAT sits at 27%, the highest in the entire European Union. The result is a system of extraordinary internal contradictions. A young single worker in Budapest faces one of the heaviest effective tax burdens in Eastern Europe. A large family in the countryside pays almost nothing. Same country, radically different fiscal reality. Number 5. Slovenia. Slovenia at number 5 is the ranking's most underreported story. This small alpine country of just 2 million people has quietly built one of the heaviest wage-based tax systems in the OECD. Social security contributions alone account for nearly 40% of total tax revenues, compared to a 26% OECD average. The combined rate of social contributions and top income tax reaches 61%, the highest among all OECD member countries. How does Slovenia sustain this without triggering mass emigration? Partly through genuine quality of life. Ljubljana consistently ranks among Europe's most livable cities. Partly through inertia, but the pressure is building. Researchers and policymakers have been openly calling for comprehensive tax reform since at least 2021. Slovenia is the quiet, overcrowded room that nobody outside the region is talking about. Yet. Number 4. Lithuania. Lithuania built its modern economy on speed. After Soviet collapse, it implemented market reforms faster than almost any post-communist state in Europe. And the tax system followed the same logic. Flat, simple, and ruthlessly efficient. For decades, a 15% flat income tax made Lithuania's labour market one of the most competitive in the Baltic region. But January 2026 changed everything. Lithuania borders Belarus and sits meters from the Kaliningrad exclave. Facing soaring defence costs, Parliament overhauled the entire system. The flat rate for higher earners was replaced with progressive brackets reaching 32%. Self-employed workers saw their rates restructured entirely. Lithuania's number in our ranking already reflects those changes. A country that built its fiscal identity on simplicity is now discovering that geopolitics has a price, and that price shows up directly on your paycheck. Number 3. Germany. Germany at number 3 is the most consequential result in this entire ranking. The world's 3rd largest economy, the industrial engine of Europe, and a tax wedge of 37.44% on an average worker, one of the heaviest labour cost structures in the developed world. Germany's Mittelstand, the hundreds of thousands of small and medium family businesses that employ nearly 60% of the workforce, has been screaming about this for years. Companies routinely cite the combined burden of income tax, social contributions, and energy levies as a primary reason for relocating production elsewhere. Between 2023 and 2025, Germany entered its first prolonged industrial contraction in decades. Economists identified labour taxation as a structural drag, not the only cause, but a permanent headwind. Germany built the most successful export economy in European history. Now it is slowly pricing itself out of its own success. Number 2. Denmark. Denmark is globally famous for something almost unique in modern politics: citizens who actually say they love paying taxes. Surveys consistently show that the vast majority of Danes don't mind their tax bill. Some say taxes are too low. In a country where the welfare state genuinely delivers free university, universal healthcare, world-class public infrastructure, this makes a certain rational sense. But here's the number nobody talks about. According to a 2019 European Parliament report on tax evasion, Denmark ranks second in Europe for tax evasion per capita, €3,027 per inhabitant per year. Italy is first, at €3,156. The gap between them? Just €129. Say one thing, do another. And Denmark leads Europe in green taxation too, carbon levies, EV transition costs, energy duties, quietly layering a fiscal dimension that no standard index captures. Before we get to number 1, if this ranking gave you something to think about, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about this kind of analysis. And if you want to discover which European countries waste the largest share of our tax money on bureaucracy and inefficient public services, write Europe in the comments. Number 1. Belgium. Belgium has the heaviest real tax burden on an average working citizen in all of Europe. A tax wedge of 39.72%, a tax-to-GDP ratio of 45.1%. For a single worker at average wage, Belgium consistently ranks as the most expensive country in the developed world to employ a human being. How did this happen? Belgium's fiscal architecture was built for a federal state permanently paralysed by linguistic and political fragmentation. Every compromise between Flemish and Walloon governments produced another layer of contributions, levies, and social charges, each one logical in isolation. Collectively, crushing. Belgian workers know this. Surveys show widespread fiscal exhaustion. Companies relocate, talent emigrates, and yet Belgium persists. Because dismantling the system requires the same political consensus that made it impossible to build a rational one in the first place. The trap was built by committee. It will take generations to escape. Remember, this index captures the 3 most significant and universal tax dimensions affecting the average worker. But every country in this ranking has its own hidden layer of local taxes, regional levies, and sector-specific duties that no single index could ever fully map. So here's your challenge. What's the most unusual, unexpected, or simply outrageous tax in your country that we didn't mention? Tell us in the comments. The most surprising answers might just end up in a future video. And remember, if you want to know which are the 10 countries where the state takes the most and gives the least, type Europe in the comments. Some governments have recently raised taxes on young workers to fund pension payments, and there are nations that will mathematically fail to guarantee their pensions in the coming years. If you want to find out which ones, watch this video. That's all for today. See you next time.